Welcome to discussions about Module 2, Modernity Emerging. And in this discussion, I will take on questions pertaining to the new scientific method. I went through your insights that you posted on Canvas, they are great. I will simply post my own notes as insights in PDF format so that you can refer to. I want here to give time in answering your questions so that the my answers can help you better understand the topic at hand. I begin with a very practical question. Some asking, what do I mean by no more than 5 sentences per insight? Is it about 5 sentences per reading or per insight in the reading? Well, I meant 5 sentences per insight that you find. There are many insights in one reading. So next time that you post, try to summarize an insight in 5 sentences. That's a practical one. Let's move on to the more, how can I say, academic ones. As we're trying to draw a line between reason and beliefs, how do we understand the separation between reason and faith? In the same line, does the lack of evidence that God or a divine being exists suggest that religion is not reasonable or it's not reasonable to believe in God? What danger will arise once, this question is a bit difficult to interpret, what danger will arise once between reason versus belief only one is chosen? I guess you wanted to ask, what if we choose between reason against belief or belief against reason? So what will be the danger? Let me try to approach these three questions together. First of all, let us take note that there's no scientific evidence that God or a divine being exists, and at the same time, there is no evidence that God or a divine being does not exist. We cannot answer this question easily. Some who are really on the scientific side and rejecting faith will simply say the fact that we cannot empirically verify God's existence, then God does not exist. Others will bring God to the level of experience or feelings. That even if feelings have a biological base, meaning given to life, might be seen as something beyond what the physical world, what science can say. So probably we need to accept that some of us believe in God without proof, and some of us do not believe in God without being able to prove that God does not exist. My favorite astrophysicist is Stephen Hawking. He wrestled with this issue. He is generally of the opinion that God does not exist. However, he listens to people who are scientists, physicists, who bring in God within their world perspective. But he also said something like that, well, even if God does exist, the universe does not need God. That's his perspective. And we shall see that even if this is very challenging to believers, and it all depends on how each person perceives faith in God, we can see that Hawking has a point, but he has a point in referring to the way that religions talk about God, present God, or place their belief in God. For example, in the current COVID-19 situation, we clearly see that science and science alone is in charge. But can this mean there's no God? Or maybe the problem is about the way we conceive God, our conception of God, I shall come back to this in a short while. But these questions are there. Now, if we will go back to the first century of Christianity, where people believed that only God could heal all kinds of illnesses, and then we zoom forward to today, post in the well in modernity and contemporary society, we don't see things in the same way. Jesus believed he could heal physically everyone. Nowadays, no one, not even highly zealous Christians, will sit at home, only pray when they are sick. They go to the doctor. So, in a certain way, Hawking might be saying, well, if God exists, maybe the universe does not need God. And others might say, it's not about the physical well being. I know that that's up to me to take care of, but maybe some find God in a different way. Now, be careful. Reason is used both by science and by religion, beliefs, faith. The difference is that science uses reason to state and to manipulate natural laws as empirically observed. And in this sense, science is always open to new ways of perceiving the world. And sometimes the new ways, when they challenge the old ways, science changes its worldview. For example, with Newton, we had a fixed understanding of gravity. With Einstein, things changed completely. His theory of relativity showed us that physical laws are more complex than the one linear cause and effect that the Newtonian physics showed. Now, since Newton did science, Einstein, as a scientist, can challenge Newton, and people accept that, and the world views change by the use of reason. The problem comes when religion and theology use the same reason, but now to explain and justify their claims about the meaning of life and tend to protect previous worldview against the new ones emerging. So both are using reason. One open to change and the other trying to explain why beliefs and practices should stay as they are. But take note, most current Christian teachings have stopped arguing about the structure of the universe. After so many fighting, for example, Galileo, well, Galileo was scared to express his scientific views in these times. He was physically threatened by the church authority. Well, you research and look up these historical facts. So Galileo was threatened by Christian teachings of his time, and really he shut up. He did not really say much. Today, no one challenges Galileo anymore, not even the Catholic Church. Even some years back, Pope John Paul II reinstituted Galileo within the confines of the Catholic Church. Now, today, modern science has been more convincing that previous beliefs about the physics of the universe, or we now start speaking about universes in the plural. So something has changed between Galileo's time and our time. So reason and belief might have clashed before, some are still clashing now, but change also happens. Other set of questions. In our current society, religion sometimes clashes with science. For instance, it is often argued that genetically modified organisms are ways of playing with God's creations. How do we draw the line between science and religion, or belief and reason, in our technology driven society? Or should a line be drawn in the first place? What are traditional aspects of society today that need to be changed in favor of more scientific methods? How can we organize our learnings in the universe without forgetting religion? How can we fully separate belief from science when it's evident that many scientists from the past were inspired through theological means? Now, let me tackle this group of questions together. We go back to religion. In general, religion or religions in the plural tend to protect the basic principle, well, their basic principle that God is in charge of everything. In this perspective, believers are expected to follow established beliefs and not to ask questions. Now, if religion, faith, church is based on God being all powerful, now the problem comes when science says we can fix nature, we can change things. Will religion accept the change? Will it mean accepting change means God is no longer in charge of everything? These are, how can I say, philosophical questions that religion have to face. Different people approach these questions differently. Now, when we look at nature, nature is always manipulating. When we look at science, science is always manipulating nature. Now, let us be clear. The advent of agriculture was the first major human effort to manipulate and change nature. And this started some 10,000 years before Christ. At that time, wild rice and corn were domesticated until they changed their biological structure to become softer versions that now we enjoy. Wild boars became the yummy pork. Now, in prehistory, as well as the start of agriculture, accidentally, human beings were already manipulating nature. Can we call this natural? Or in our days, we will want to call it organic. Organic as if we don't intervene. It does not seem to be correct. Human beings have always used culture to intervene in nature, and this is the reason why we are where we are. Now, going back to the origins of agriculture. At that time, religion was still very powerful, and no one questioned these natural changes, probably because they happened so slow that you could not see with your eyes, and probably also because people did not understand how such natural changes happened at the micro level. Maybe they thought God intervened and helped them have better meat, better seeds to eat. The difference is that now we know what happens when nature changes by itself, natural evolution, natural selection, or we intervene and change nature. GMOs are one of the current results of biology, understanding and manipulating the core of life, the DNA. And now we know how it works. And humans change nature in novel ways. In other words, now science purposefully intervenes based on rigorous empirical knowledge. At the advent of agriculture, natural changes occurred without us knowing why, but they occurred in similar ways. But now we know how and we purposefully intervene. Maybe that's my perspective. Maybe the problem is not with God. Maybe the problem is with people claiming to represent God. Because here again, if by declaring God to be in charge of everything, and I state that I represent God, then I might not accept the fact that science is making me lose power over people because science is convincing me otherwise. But be careful, not all believers are shaken by this issue. Some people are both happy believers and passionate scientists, in the sense that their perception of God is different from the metaphysical and speculative definition of God as absolute, all powerful, all knowing, controlling everything, controlling everyone, and so on and so forth. So, for some people, they understand the concept of God in a very different way. That's why some people draw the line, God versus religion, and some don't. Who is right? Who is wrong? I cannot answer this question. It's up to each one of us to analyze the situation and see what's going on. But maybe what's most important here is to understand the tension between the novelty of science and the conservative tendency of religion. Next group of questions. There is a contradiction between science and reason versus the church's doctrines. How do traditional religious authorities remain present as a dominant figure in this age where reason prevails? Now, again, as mentioned, reason is used both by science and religion. Nowadays, the Catholic authority focuses more on social and moral issues rather on the physical world as it did during the time of Galileo. Something changed there where the physical world is concerned. Maybe in time, certain social things can also change. Did Newton just utterly believe that gravity was a direct divine action of God, despite his analysis of forces and his principle of universal gravitation? Well, according to the reading, he did believe, so no one can challenge his belief. He is one example of the happy believer and scientist that we encounter. In the past, we've seen how science can have moral, ethical, and sometimes religious consequences in the pursuit of knowledge and in the innovation of new things. How then should we approach science whenever we encounter these issues? Well, there are several approaches to ethics and science. Some approaches are very conservative and some more innovative. Maybe the crucial question is whether a certain scientific innovation helps or harms humans. Maybe this is the question that science can ask and answer when deciding on ethical issues. How did they distinguish pseudoscience from actual science? I guess this question is bringing us back to maybe the initial rising of modernity and the Enlightenment. It's not that clear, but here's my take. First of all, perhaps the term pseudoscience refers to everything that does not follow the experimentation approach of modern science. However, can we simply state that pseudoscience is wrong? For example, our prehistoric ancestors found ways to understand the world and predict weather and seasons. They might have assigned the astral movements to gods, but they understood these astral changes and they applied whatever happened in the universe to their way of going about. They knew the different kinds of seasons that they would follow. When is it ready for them to plant, to harvest? That's scientific knowledge, but not scientific in the sense of modern science. They would have said, the gods have given us a good harvest this time. They would not be saying that, wow, our scientific knowledge helped us make things better. But they did make the cultural effort to make things better by learning, by trial and error, and by refining their approaches. Some even followed the stars to travel thousands of miles by sea without GPS. Can we call that incorrect? We can call it pseudoscience, but it still has its worth. But I'm not sure if this question is also maybe thinking of practices against observation. In that case, we would not call it pseudoscience. We might call it beliefs. Some will want to call it superstitions. For example, how do you heal someone who is epileptic? Do you intervene through scientific medical approaches? Do you pray over that person because you believe that that person is possessed by the devil? I'm not sure if that's the direction that this question wanted to go, but whatever direction it wants to go, if it's about science, then pre modern science can be accepted as science in its own terms, but our current form is strongly based on experimentation and empirical testing, predicting, and so on. Thank you very much for listening this discussion, and thank you for your questions. They are very interesting, intriguing, and they push me to think more with you all.